One day, when I was in the third grade, I woke up suddenly at midnight. I was so hungry. I went straight down to the kitchen and looked around nervously. Then I opened the fridge. "What are you doing here, you freak?" Mom screamed. I jumped and nearly fell over. Oh no, I was dead now. I gulped as I saw her outline in the darkness. She was sitting on the couch, facing the fridge. "Mom?" I started, but suddenly she switched on a flashlight and shone it at me. I squinted my eyes. It really hurt. I covered my eyes and said again in a shaky voice, "Mom, I'm hungry." "I don't care. How dare you touch the fridge without wearing gloves? You filthy pig. Are you too stupid to understand that my house must remain clean and spotless?" Mom yelled. Her eyes were shining in the darkness. I was terrified. I thought she would hit me or throw me out of the house. I ran past her. She tried to stop me, but I managed to escape. I went upstairs to my parents' bedroom. I screamed at Dad to wake up. "Daddy, please wake up. I'm hungry." He looked at me and shrugged. Then he said in his sleepy voice, "Hush, go to your room now. She will hear us." Before I could respond, I heard my mom coming up the stairs. I ran outside and into my room. I locked the door and jumped into bed. In the morning, I woke up to Mom banging on the door like a maniac. It was time for her crazy tidiness routine. As I opened the door, she dragged me and my half-asleep brother to the washroom. "My kid should smell good and be totally clean." She then made us wash our hands with soap twice. She scrubbed them so hard I thought they would bleed. Then she finally handed us some sanitizer. It burned. She even had a disinfectant in a bottle that she would spray all over us. It smelled like 6-week-old socks. I hated the smell of it, but I stood still the whole time. My little brother, though, he was a different story. He is 2 years younger than me. He never obeyed Mom. No matter how much Mom yelled at him, he would just go and cover himself in filth again. Sometimes he would rush into the garbage can right after the morning scrub and dive into it. "You can't make me use all these stupid products," he yelled as she chased him around the house. Then he poured water on the floor and licked it up. Then he stuck out his tongue at Mom. She looked like she was going to have a stroke. I loved my little brother, wouldn't you? Life was crazy, and every day was crazier than the last. Mom became more obsessed with cleanliness every day. At least things weren't bad at school, or so I thought. One day, I noticed the girls in my class pointing at me and whispering suspiciously. As soon as I approached them, they stopped talking. I asked them what was wrong. At first, no one said anything, but then one of them, Lily, said, "Oh, nothing. We were just talking about a so-called friend who never invited us to her house." I gulped. Oh no. She continued mocking me. "We think her house must stink or something. That's the only reason she never asks us over." I was stunned. Feeling horrified, I said that wasn't true. I told them my house always smelled great, like flowers, but they didn't believe me. They turned their backs on me and began to walk away. "You can all come over after school today," I yelled suddenly. There was only one way to stop them from talking about me, but little did I know, it was all about to get so much worse. After school, I rushed home. I found Mom hunched over an old painting in the attic. She was scrubbing it furiously. I grabbed a cloth and disinfectant and started cleaning with her. I had to make her love me, at least for the next 2 hours. Seeing me join her, gloves and all, she smiled proudly at me. "Dana, you have a lot to learn. When I was your age, my mom..." She started talking. It looked like I was in for a long trip down memory lane. Ugh. But just then, the doorbell rang and interrupted our conversation. Excited, I ran to open it. It was my friends. I let them in. I couldn't wait for them to see how incredibly nice my house smelled. Then they'd see. But to my total humiliation, when my friends and I entered the living room, Mom was yelling at my brother. When I saw what he was up to, I gasped. He had brought in cups filled with mud, and it was everywhere. For the first time, I wished he hadn't been so messy. He was laughing like an idiot. "I saw Dana's friends coming, so I ran to the backyard to offer them some drinks." Immediately, Mom whipped around and saw me with my friends. She froze. For a minute, I thought she was going to pass out. What the? Was she about to curse at my friends? I cut in and tried to act normal. Mom, this is... But there was no way Mom was having it. I don't care who this is, stupid. I tried to explain, but she kept being meaner and meaner. What are these people doing in my house? She started yelling like a madwoman. I was horrified. My friends would never let me live it down. They looked uncomfortably at each other, and finally, Lily said, "Your house is so nice, Mrs. Green," but my mom couldn't care less. "It would be so much nicer if you disgusting little morons were out of it," Mom screamed. One of the girls, Mallory, burst into tears, and the others looked scared. They ran to the door and were almost outside when Lily suddenly turned around. In a dead serious tone, she said, "You're no longer our friend. Your mom is a psycho." To make matters worse, my idiotic brother started giggling. "Tell me something I don't know," he said as he scooped up some mud and threw it at Lily, yelling, "Silly Lily looks like a hillbilly." Lily ran out of the door with one last threatening look. She was going to kill me. I knew that I would never be able to make friends anymore. My social life was over. But at that moment, I didn't have time to worry about Lily because Mom looked at me with evil eyes, and she looked like she would kill me first. "You'll regret that. I know you're doing this on purpose. You want to torture me. You just want to finish me off. You don't know who you're dealing with," Mom said. Then Mom grounded me for a month. To make matters worse, she had decided that I was to blame every time my brother did something stupid. As much as I loved his antics, how was that my fault? Once, my brother brought his friends over at midnight. Everyone was asleep when he and his friends started having a fight over a girl. We all went downstairs to see what was going on. My brother was standing at the side, cheering for his friends to have a fight, and so they did. They broke things, and it was chaos. Mom was yelling at them to stop. She kicked them all out and looked at me with evil eyes. You're going to clean everything up before dawn, or else." I tried to protest and convince her to change her mind, but there was no use. She left the living room, threatening me and yelling, and I spent all night cleaning. But I knew that I had to do something. Things couldn't go on like this forever. A week later, my brother painted our living room wall. Mom didn't even say a word to him that time. Instead, she said that at least my brother had talent, unlike me, the useless creature who can't even clean like any real girl can. I knew she was right. I was really useless. Just then, she started laughing hysterically. I turned to see my dad coming through the front door. He looked angrily at Mom and said, "What are you laughing at, woman?" Suddenly, Mom's expression changed and she looked at him with venom in her eyes. "How dare you enter the house without taking off your shoes?" Mom said. Within minutes, the two were yelling like maniacs at each other. That was normal. It was basically part of our routine. My brother looked at them entertained, and I left them and went in my room. Life moved on like that, and by the time I was in the 7th grade, I had started sneaking out of the house because things were really crazy at home. I started going out with boys, but of course never had the courage to invite any of them over to my house, or to be more accurate, my mom's house. That is, until I met Zach. He was a real man, unlike my dad. He knew how to treat a girl. He used to yell at me when I made him mad. I loved that. I felt like a real woman with him. Once, I forgot to wake him up at school. He got so mad at me and said that I was useless. I begged him to forgive me, but he said we were over. I thought that was so attractive. I told him that I loved him so much and wanted him to meet my family. He refused, and I had to literally beg. Finally, he seemed convinced and agreed. I was thrilled, but then I was a bit nervous. I wasn't sure about how Mom would react to what I did, but it was too late to change anything. One night, my family was having dinner when Zach and I walked in. I said, "Hey y'all, this is Zach, my boyfriend, and he's gonna have dinner with us tonight." My brother smiled and said, "I never thought I would say this, but my sister has good taste." And then he extended his dirty hand to shake Zach's. Zach looked at my brother and then his hand and said, "Wash your hands before touching other people, idiot." That was all my mom needed to hear. She looked at him in awe. Her eyes were shining. I could tell she was impressed. The next second, Mom pushed me away and invited Zach to sit next to her. "So, Zach, you're my new favorite person now." Dad cut in and joked, "That's an achievement. You've never had a favorite person before. Only favorite gloves, favorite sanitizers, favorite mops." Mom looked like Dad had punched her. Within minutes, a huge fight erupted. Suddenly she yelled, I sometimes wish I'd married someone else. Dad froze and then said, "Well, you have your chance now. I'm leaving." Dad left, and just like that, we never heard from him again. Mom got even crazier afterward and started more fights with us. Once, when I was in the 10th grade, Zach and I were spending time together in my room. I tried to kiss him and he shyly said he had something important to tell me. I knew it. He was going to say it. He said, "Dana, I said, "Just say it, dude." I encouraged him excitedly. Suddenly, I heard my mom yell from downstairs. We rushed downstairs to see what was going on. My brother was there, holding a paintbrush in his mouth, and the living room was a disaster. Paint cans were all over the place. Mom looked at me and yelled, "Your brother went insane. What crazy things have you filled his head with?" Then, in a serious tone, looking like he'd had a divine revelation, he said, "Everyone, I have finally found out the truth about myself." My mom totally ignored him. "Whatever you're going to say, I suggest you discover your dirty self out of my house." But my brother apparently was very serious because he didn't even acknowledge her. "Mom, I think you should all know that I'm gay." I began laughing. This was news. But suddenly, Zach let go of my hand. "Yeah, Dana, just letting you know that I cheated on you and I want to break up with you." I gasped. What the hell? Was my mom right? Was I so useless that I made my boyfriend go after another woman? This was too much to take. I knew I had to get away from my bizarre family. I decided to contact my dad. There was only one way to find him. I went to the police and found his address. Finding his place wasn't very difficult, but going there was. His place was dirty and disgusting. It absolutely stank. But that wasn't the worst thing. He had a woman with him. When he saw me, he slammed the door in my face. I yelled and banged till he opened it. Angrily, he said that he couldn't take me in. "Go back to her. That's better for you." I begged him to let me stay. I promised him I'd not get in his way. Then the lady with him said, "Oh, come on, let her in. Look at this place. She can clean it, just like her mom." Yeah, she was right. I had literally no value. The least I could do was put my mom's talent to use. I agreed in a heartbeat. I had to admit, my dad's woman wasn't half bad. She thought I was smart and that I deserved a better life. Even though I didn't believe what she said, it felt good, and she thought so. One day, while me and my dad's girlfriend were discussing my college applications, we heard a knock on the door. I went to open it. It was my mom. I rolled my eyes. "What now?" I asked her. She pushed her way in, and when she saw my dad's girlfriend, she froze. I figured she was surprised to find out he was dating again, but what she said caught me off guard. "You again," Mom yelled. Wait, what? They knew each other? My mother was yelling hysterically now. "You stole everything from me. My husband, my daughter. Wasn't stealing my own mom enough?" I looked around, confused. What in the hell was she talking about? I didn't steal them," my dad's girlfriend said coldly. "They all came to me because you're such a nightmare. Just get over it." My dad jumped in. "Yeah, she wasn't even your real mom, loser," Dad shouted. "Just one of our caregivers at the children's home." Wait, I knew my parents had grown up in a children's home and didn't have their own families, but this woman had been there too? Mom looked really hurt and said, "She had promised she would adopt me. I did everything. I cleaned and I cleaned to get everything exactly the way she wanted, and then she just abandoned me and adopted her instead." My mom was yelling with tears streaming down her face. I kept telling myself it was a mistake. "She'll come back for me. I know it. She'll choose me. You'll all see." Mom screamed, her voice shaking. Hearing this, my dad started laughing. "Ugh, you're so pathetic and crazy. No wonder she didn't choose you," he said. By now, I'd heard enough. These people were terrible. Whoever this woman was, she had driven my mom crazy and wasn't even sorry about it. "Don't talk to her like that," I suddenly cut in. "She's my mom, and I love her no matter what." I turned to Mom with teary eyes and held out my hand to her. She clung to my hand like a little girl, and she continued crying. "I knew you'd come back," she sobbed. Her eyes looked distant. I patted her back gently and said, "Come on, Mom. Let's go home." "I can't believe you made this," my mom said, looking disgusted. I was sitting in my playroom one afternoon, just finishing off a painting of my mom's favorite yellow flower. "I made it for you, Mommy," I said, handing it to her. "And what am I supposed to do with this garbage?" she asked. I started to cry as my mom tossed the painting into the fireplace. "You draw like an idiot. What do you expect? Ugh, just go to your room. You're acting like a 5-year-old. "But I am 5, I cried as my mom left me all alone in the room. This pretty much sums up the relationship I have with my mom. While this memory is still stuck in my head forever, it wasn't even close to the worst thing I can remember her doing. See, my mom treated me like complete trash. Literally, I slept on a blanket in the living room and only ate the leftovers from her meals. She was a crazy psycho, and to make things worse, she didn't have a career back then. Her only job was torturing me as if she were getting paid for it. Her crazy ways chased my dad far away from us. He sent us enough money to live off of and left me all alone with this monster. It's not that she hated all kids, though. In fact, this kind of made it a bit worse. When I was in 6th grade, my friend came over and my mom opened the door. "Oh, you're friends with this stupid creature?" She treated my friend better than me. She even let my friend sit at the dining room table for dinner. My friend thought my mom was cool and funny, and they both kind of teamed up on me. When I confronted my mom about why she acted the way she did, she simply said, "Be more like your friend, and maybe I won't hate you." I really tried to make her like me, I promise. I did good in school, never got into trouble, constantly did all the chores, and bought her gifts. One day when I was cleaning her room for her, I really thought my life was going to turn around for the better. Spoiler alert, I couldn't have been more wrong. Under my mom's bed, I found a gift box. My birthday was that weekend, so I just assumed it was for me. I was so excited. On my birthday, she took out the package and started walking towards me. I was crying with happiness, thinking it was for me. When she asked why I was crying like an idiot, I explained that this was the first time she'd ever acknowledged my birthday. She started to laugh. Not in a nice way, but like a supervillain. "Your birthday? This is for a friend, you fool. Her birthday party is today. I guess you didn't get the invitation," she said. Later on Facebook, I saw that my friend actually had a party and invited everyone but me. She even invited my mom. I spent my whole birthday crying in my room, all alone. When I was in the 11th grade, my dad stopped sending us money. He had a new wife and a baby. He sent me an apology note and said that he would see me soon, but I knew it wasn't true. I figured my mom would find a job, but she did something crazy unexpected. See, I came home one day and saw this beautiful woman sitting in my living room. I asked her what she was doing in my house, and she said in a foreign accent, "Oh, your mom was right. She does have an ugly daughter," she said. I yelled at her and told her that she had to leave. That's when my mom came in and asked what all of the screaming was about. I tried to tell my mom how the stranger was making fun of me. Her response? "That's no way to treat my girlfriend. You really are rude," Mom yelled. "Girlfriend?" She ran over and put her arm around the gorgeous woman. My mom explained how she had realized she was a lesbian and she'd fallen in love with a graduate student she met at the park. The girl's parents were incredibly rich, and apparently my mom took the opportunity to get with her. I didn't know how dumb that girl was. She was 15 years younger than my mom, and they seemed to have nothing in common. Nothing in common besides making fun of me, of course. I thought my mom was bad, but having both of them constantly making fun of me was so much worse. They called me names, stole my stuff, and embarrassed me in front of my classmates. I remember this one time in particular, my mom and her girlfriend drove to my school after class. They made it seem like they were going to pick me up, which was not something they normally did. When I got near the car, her girlfriend threw a soda on my white shirt, and they laughed and drove away. Everyone in my school saw, and not a single person came to help me. I just ran home, crying the entire way. I may not have had friends or family, but I did have one thing: education. I know a lot of people hate school, but class was the only time I ever felt like a person. There was one person who made it particularly special: my math teacher, Mr. White. He was super nice to me, and I did very well in his class. He said, "You're a brilliant kid. I'm sure your mom is proud of you." Oh yeah, exactly the opposite. I continued to do super well in his class. In the beginning, it was because I really liked math. As time went on, I think I worked so hard in his class because he was easy on the eyes, if you know what I mean. He wasn't the most attractive man, but he was young and nerdy, and most of all, super nice to me. When he asked me to compete in an international math competition, I immediately agreed. A private trip to NYC with my biggest crush? Sign me up. I figured my mom would be happy to get me out of the house, but apparently she was happier to see my dreams crushed. She told me no, and it didn't matter how much I begged her. I wrote my teacher a sad email explaining that I couldn't come. What happened next started out like a fantasy. See, around 7 p.m., we heard a knock at the door. I ran over to answer it, and it was him. I'd never seen him outside of a suit and tie, and I have to say, he was actually really attractive. Unfortunately, I wasn't the only one to think so. My mom was all over him. She was only wearing her pajamas and had no shame touching him and leaning over him. As it turns out, I wasn't the only one getting a little jealous seeing their love getting attention. My stepmom was furious. She kept trying to pull my mom away and cover her up with a blanket. It was also obvious that Mr. White wasn't very interested in her, and he kept nervously stepping back. Eventually, my stepmom snapped and yelled, "Honey, you're embarrassing all of us. Leave that poor kid alone. You have a wife." My mom flipped out and growled at my stepmom. "Shut up, stupid." As their fighting continued, Mr. White slipped outside. So much for our getaway. Things only got worse with my mom and stepmom over the weeks following. Their fighting just made it even more difficult for me. When they weren't yelling and throwing things at each other, they would make my life miserable for no reason. The only thing I had to look forward to was Mr. White. I was falling hard, maybe a little too hard, because I started dreaming about him. One night, I had a dream that he and I got married. Pretty embarrassing, right? At least dreams are private, right? Well, the next day, my mom had an evil grin and called me over to talk to her. She pulled out her phone and showed a video of me sleeping. I thought it was creepy, but it was about to be the worst thing ever. "Oh, I love you, Rick White. I really do. I want your babies." She had heard me sleeping and recorded me. Unfortunately, I wasn't the only one in love with Mr. White. She blackmailed me and said that I needed to make the teacher come over more often or she would expose me. It was pretty difficult to convince my teacher to come, but I kept making up situations like, "Oh, I need help with this assignment," or "Oh, I want extra credit." He showed up again, and every time he did, my mom would put on her prettiest dress and bright red lipstick. It was the same cycle of him coming, my mom obviously flirting, and her wife getting jealous and angry. When my stepmom asked why I kept inviting him, I broke down and told her the truth about the video. All she said was that she would take care of it. I thought that meant that she would delete it, but I was so wrong. The final time my teacher came over and my mom started flirting, my stepmom whipped out her phone and showed the video of me to my teacher. I could have died right there of embarrassment. My mom got so angry, she threw me right out of there. I was crying hard, but Mr. White was oddly nice. He explained to me that we didn't need to talk about the video. He knew I was having some home problems after he met my parents. He wanted to let me know that I could stay with him if I wanted to. Embarrassed or not, I went with him. I started fantasizing about playing house with him, but I was a little shocked when he showed me my room. It was in the basement. At least it had a bed, which was a step above my last arrangement. To make matters worse, I wasn't alone. I would be sharing the room with Sally. She was another stray that Mr. White had taken in. She didn't go to our school, but we were about the same age. She purposely played her music loud all night and made a mess of my things. She was trying to make my life miserable, but the joke was on her because I already knew what hell was like, and she was a piece of cake so far. I tried my best to look past everything that had happened. I worked very hard and studied for finals. It was kind of difficult with my mom sending me hundreds of threatening texts a day, but I made it work. In fact, my grades were even improving. Mr. White constantly told me how proud he was of me and what an amazing student I was. He told me that Sally could learn a thing or two about my work ethic. She was not happy about that. It was pretty obvious that Sally was jealous of me. See, she was one of those people who acted out for attention, and Mr. White didn't respond the way she wanted. On the day of my huge final exam, she turned off my phone so the alarm didn't ring, and I missed school and the exam. I was so disappointed and devastated. I knew Mr. White wouldn't be happy about it. That night, someone knocked on the door. It was my stepmom. She said she needed help with her English exam because spending all these months with my mom had affected her performance. I should have turned her away after everything she'd done, but I was better than that. I agreed to start teaching her the next day. A second knock at the door took me by surprise. It was none other than Mr. White. Before I could explain what had happened, he went off on a rant about how Sally already explained how I skipped school and did all these horrible things. He wanted to believe that I was a good girl, but it was clear that I was just a rebel. I had only one strike left before he kicked me out. He shut the door in my face before I could explain the situation. I figured it wouldn't be a problem because I was a good student. I was about to be shocked again by Sally's creativity. See, the very next day, when I had my stepmom over for lessons, Mr. White came in and threw me out. Apparently, Sally had told him I was sitting alone in my room with my girlfriend and was making noises, and she was scared. We both knew what she meant to say. That night, I was sent packing all alone. I stayed with my stepmom in her studio apartment for a few days, but it was awkward, and it was time to address the elephant in the room. I decided to go back to my mom. To my surprise, she wasn't angry and didn't say anything to me. I decided to focus on my studies, and I got the scholarship, but Mom was absent almost all the time. Mr. White contacted me and said he wanted me back and that Sally had actually become a problem and he'd realized I was better. There was something creepy about the way he said it. I also thought it was such a jerk move to take kids in and out as he pleased. How long would his kindness last? I said, "Sorry, I'm happy with my life now, and I'll be going to college soon." I was moving to college the week after when Mom suddenly came home with a guest. I couldn't see them, only hear them. The man said she has to leave. Mom burst into my room and said, "It's your dad. He wants you to leave now." It turned out that Dad had left Mom because he didn't want kids, and he thought a new baby would be different, but he hated his new life. He knew I was old enough to move out by now, so he had shown back up to reunite with my mom. I didn't know where to go. I went to my stepmom's and found Sally there. She had started to live with my stepmom after the teacher kicked her out. She was my stepmom's new teacher and helped her with her English. Sally was furious when she saw me, and we got into a huge fight. I couldn't have this horrible fighting be in my life again, so I walked out. I slept that night on the steps outside of the house. In the morning, Mom called and told me, "Your dad and I have decided to have you back, but under one condition. You have to get a job and pay me back every cent I spent on you." I was about to say yes when I looked up to see a job poster. Accountant wanted. I knew it was my chance. I said on the phone, "Screw you guys." I applied for the job and got it. I even managed to enroll in college and found the love of my life. We moved into an amazing house, and I thought my life was finally perfect. Until one day, the bell rang. It was my mom. She said that she was broke, and Dad had left her again. She needed a place to stay, so, against my better judgment, I let her move in. For 3 days, she behaved nicely, but on the 4th, I saw her in her pretty dress and red lipstick trying to flirt with my poor husband. She was batting her eyelashes at him and laughing the way I remembered only too well. Was she already doing this to me again? I couldn't stand it anymore. I'd had enough. I opened the door and kicked her out. If she was going to behave like that, she belonged on the streets, and that's where she could stay.
What are you doing? I gasped in horror as my mom tore apart our kitchen. She had 5 garbage bags full of perfectly good food. "I am making sure you stay nice and healthy," she responded as she turned her attention to me. It was a pathetic image. I was hugging a bag of baby carrots for dear life. She snatched them out of my hands and threw them into a bag. As she dragged the garbage bags to the curb, she told me it was for my own good. I was devastated. I couldn't believe some yoga freak had convinced her to throw away hundreds of dollars worth of food. If you think this is bad, wait till you hear what I did get to eat. Before I get into why a weird lady with hairy legs is the reason no one calls me by my old name anymore, take the time to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you do, you'll have 10 years of good health. Trust me, I know a little something about health. I know that parents just want you to be healthy, but my mom takes it to a new extreme. See, my mom always prided herself on being a health nut. I never ate processed sugar or even meat. I grew up on all organic and vegan foods. I remember this one time she tried to throw a birthday party for me, and she made a cake out of tofu, salad dressing, and carrots. One of the kids literally threw up. Things didn't get any better as I got older either. One time, she packed me an organic lunch, and it smelled so bad they evacuated the class. The principal thought it was a gas leak. It was actually just my smelly cabbage casserole. But her fitness obsession wasn't the only freaky thing about her. You would not believe the crazy things she did to stay up with the latest trends. She literally embarrassed herself and me on national television. I didn't legally change my name for no reason. She went through phases faster than a middle school girl. One day, she'd be dressed all preppy and sporty. The next, she was going out looking like a goth. One time, when I was 6, I went to a friend's place for a sleepover, and when I came home, I didn't recognize my own mom. I cried so hard because I thought my mom had left me. I used to think that her worst phase was the time her friend convinced her to join a cult. She actually shaved her head and painted her skin green. But boy, was I wrong. That wasn't a patch on what I'm going to tell you next. The worst thing was that the person behind my misery wasn't a creep with green skin. This time, it was a seemingly harmless lady with a sweet smile. So I really didn't see it coming. Even worse, I may have brought them together. I was an aspiring singer and actress, and I often performed at the community center and local theater. My mom met her at one of my performances and immediately became her best friend. She was calm and relaxed. I was actually pretty relieved about my mom meeting someone who was actually normal. So I encouraged Mom to invite her over to dinner one night. Oh, how I cursed my stars for that moment. Because when her friend came over, Mom put out a nice spread of salads using vegetables from her own garden. She was certain she'd impress her friend. But her yogi friend stuck up her nose and gagged with disgust. "I thought you were healthy," she sneered. I practically choked on the bean sprout I popped in my mouth. She went on to list all the dangers of food and talked about how the government can track you through carrots and that there are magic spells in nuts. My mom nearly died of embarrassment. I burst out laughing. I thought she was kidding at first. I asked her if she didn't eat food, then what does she eat? Apparently, she had been waiting for someone to ask because she whipped out a suitcase full of tablets. She explained that she was the CEO of a special company that sold the only safe things to eat on the market. I told her she was insane. But guess who bought it all? Yep, my mom. "Seriously? I know you're friends and all, but $1,000? I asked. I told my mom it was a scam, but she was super positive that this was the food of the future. In fact, she even got so paranoid about government tracking that she made me wear a hat made of tinfoil that, you guessed it, was sold to her by her yogi friend. I figured it would blow over in a few days, like her last few phases. But I was very, very wrong. The next evening, when we sat down for a meal, she poured those stupid tablets on my plate. I asked her to make me a sandwich, and you would have thought I'd slapped her. She glared at me and refused to give me anything else. She said there was no way on earth she could do me such harm. In fact, she said she would throw away all our food. For the next month, I lived off of granola bars and vegetables I stole from the garden. I even ordered one of those snack boxes and hid all the chips in my room. I would literally drool whenever I saw a commercial for McDonald's or Pizza Hut on the TV. My mom, though, she seemed perfectly content eating those stupid tablets. One day, I'd had enough and decided to have a real meal. One of my biggest crushes, Bruce, had asked me out on a date the day before, and I texted him that I was ready to be picked up immediately. I let my mom know I was going out and ran out the door before she could say anything. I hopped in his car and told him I wanted to go anywhere. I was starving. My phone was blowing up with tons of warnings about staying away from food and how I forgot my special hat. It was so annoying that I shut off my phone so she wouldn't wreck my evening. But to be honest, I managed to ruin my day all by myself. He kept trying to make deep conversation and connect with me. Unfortunately, my body had a mind of its own. See, every time it was my turn to talk, my stomach would growl. I tried shifting in my seat to make it look like it was just the chair squeaking, but it was obvious that sound was coming from me. I just hoped he didn't think I was farting on our first date. I was so embarrassed. And to make matters worse, he seemed embarrassed for me. He was going to take me to the movies, but when he saw how much my stomach was growling, He asked if I wanted some real food. I never nodded so hard in my life. He took me to a pizza place all my classmates hung out at. Due to my mom's obsession with healthy food, I'd never eaten pizza before, and I couldn't be more excited. I mean, I didn't know if I was more excited to see Bruce or the pizza he took me out for. By the time our food came out, I was drooling. I literally had a puddle on my new top. It was actually pretty embarrassing when Bruce asked me if I'd spilled water on my shirt. But my evening was about to get even worse. Just as I was about to bite into the juiciest slice of pizza I'd ever seen, someone slapped it out of my hand. I almost cried as I watched the pizza fall to the floor. I whipped around and saw that my mom was there, and she was furious. I wanted to scream. Then, to make matters worse, she started shouting at me. She went on this long rant about how crazy and idiotic I was to eat food after I'd heard about the spells in the tracker. She kept trying to hand me the stupid metal hat, which ruined my hair and made me look like an insane robot. "Who is this crazy lady?" Bruce asked. "I would be her mother, young man," she shouted back. I wanted to crawl under the table, and that's exactly what I did. My hiding was rather short-lived as my mother dragged me out from under the table and pulled me back to her car. I had a feeling I wasn't going to get asked on a second date. To be honest, I was sadder about leaving the pizza behind. After that, Mom strengthened her iron fist. As I ran out of snacks, I grew hungrier by the day. This was bad news all around. See, if I get too hungry, I get hangry. I get mad and moody and snap at everything. I just wanted to eat real food. My mom saw I was upset and decided to surprise me with the news that I'd been called back for an audition I was particularly hyped about. I was glad, but at this point, I'd be happier if I got an apple. What I wouldn't do for a nice, juicy apple! To my utter disgust, my mom even brought her stupid yogi friend to watch in the audience. My mom said it was for support, but I could see her friend was looking to sell her dumb products to anyone she ran into. Today is not about that, though, I told myself. Today is about me. I was excited, but something felt off. I told my mom I was starving, and she just gave me a new round of tablets. They looked a little different from the ones I'd taken before, but I was too tired to even question it. Unfortunately, when it was my time to walk up and perform, I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be. As I walked on the stage waving to the camera, I lost my balance from dizziness and tripped. If falling wasn't bad enough, I literally crashed into the musicians and even broke a guitar. Everyone started booing me. I stood up to try to show them my skills and make up for my blunder, but my stars had something else in store for me. I projectile vomited all over the crowd. I ran backstage without even seeing, as if I could now. I wanted this day to end, but judging by the numbers of cameras pointing at me, I wasn't forgetting this day anytime soon. I also was not talking to my mom anytime soon. This was totally her fault. I ran out of the hall. Thankfully, Mom was nowhere to be seen. I decided to go and get myself something to eat from the McDonald's across the street. It was trashy, but I deserved a burger right about now. When I walked through the door, I shrieked. It was my mom. She was sitting by herself at a corner table and had a hamburger half jammed into her mouth. I couldn't believe it. I ran straight over to her. "So the pill diet isn't good enough for you, but it's good enough to ruin my life?" Horrified, my mom asked why I wasn't on stage. She obviously hadn't even bothered to watch me. Instead of supporting me, she was cheating on the diet she forced on me. She said she could explain, and it was just a one-time moment of weakness. But no way was I buying that story. I was so disgusted. I decided I would rather starve than talk to her. But that's when I remembered I was on the other side of town, and I was starving. I realized that my last hope was the only person I never wanted to face again. My stomach grumbled, and I knew I didn't have a choice. I made the call. Bruce came surprisingly fast. Turns out, he had come to watch me. Instead of laughing or making fun of me, though, he was super sweet. He even stopped and got me a milkshake so we could hang out. He then brought me to my empty house, where I packed up all my stuff and went to live with Bruce. I was done with whatever crazy things my mom had going on. I even filled out paperwork to legally change my name, so I would never have to be associated with that embarrassment who puked all over the stage. Bruce took me out on a date to take my mind off of everything. We decided to check out this fancy place that opened up on the other side of town. When we walked in, I saw someone fall out of the chair and break a glass. I ran over to help, and who did I see? None other than my mom. Again? One time weakness my butt. She had seen me walk in and was hiding from me. That's when I saw what she had on her plate. A steak! Was this what she always did? This time I wasn't going to ignore her. I was furious. She was such a hypocrite. She begged and pleaded to explain why she did what she did. She said that when she was my age, she struggled with body image issues and had lost a big break because she had binged on junk food and gotten deathly sick right before an audition. Quite ironic, I thought, given that I'd ended up doing the same trying to starve myself. She said she thought that if she raised me on a strict diet to stay lean and thin, I would be successful and not miss my chance just because of bad eating habits. There was just one small problem. She couldn't lead by example, so she would go out and buy hamburgers and fries in private. Unfortunately, though, my problems didn't end there. Even after we made up, I couldn't go back home. My mom lost her house because of how expensive her friends' treatments were. Between tablets and crazy privacy devices, she was over $300K in debt. I nearly fainted when she said that. Sure, we weren't poor, but we weren't that well off to just throw away hundreds of thousands of dollars like that. I demanded that my mom go and confront her yogi friend immediately because we were getting our money back. This was actually the first time my mom was going to visit her home. I imagined the smelly hippie living in a trailer park or a tent in someone's backyard. This lady was living like a queen. She had a huge mansion covered with gold statues and a giant fountain. When we knocked on the door, a butler answered. We asked if it was the right place, and he said it certainly was. Only problem was that just a few hours ago, the police had taken her away. The police? We were in shock. We drove down to the station and joined a large group of people out front. When we asked what the big crowd was for, it turned out they were all also looking for the lady. That yogi lady scammed hundreds of people out of millions of dollars. Sometimes she was a nun selling magical holy water that she scooped out of the sewers. Other times she was a hippie that sold dog pills as supplements. Hearing that I had spent months eating nothing but dog pills made me almost projectile vomit on the crowd. If nothing else, this story has a bit of a happy ending. See, we ended up getting $2 million in our settlement case against her. It was more than enough for my mom to get a new house and me to start my career as an actress. I'm grown up and moved out now, but I do meet my mom for a weekly dinner. She still tries to be healthy, but in a good way. I like to say that she learned her lesson about being gullible, but she just asked me and my now boyfriend to come to some mysterious spa that will change my life forever. Wish me luck.
You may think your parents are cheap, but believe me, you've got it good. My mom takes saving to the next level. My mom saved up everything, literally everything. Our house had different stations where we recycled plastic, fabric, paper, and so on. But worst of all was the compost bin in the kitchen for recycling food and leftovers, and I can't even describe the horrible smell that came out of it. My mom, of course, refused to put it outside. The squirrels would ruin the compost we've been saving up, is what she claimed. Because of that, every time my friends would come over, they'd complain about the terrible smell, until the day I was known in school as the girl whose house smells like a pig stable. When I was 7 years old, Mom stopped driving her car and designed her own special rickshaw with 2 seats in the back for my brother Mark and I. She drove us to school in this rickshaw for years. Back then, we thought we were cool. People waved at us and smiled. It was actually like we were the head of a special parade. I thought my mom was very creative. We always have to be prepared for the worst. Your grandpa has taught me well. He said, "Trisha, this is the best way to take care of your family," she said proudly. When we were very young, Mom bought toys from secondhand stores and then stitched them up for us. We were too young to care where the toys came from. The funny thing is that we didn't know how cheap my mom was until Tracy, one of my friends, came to visit when we were younger. She came over to my house for a sleepover when we were 10. "Why does your mom take ketchup, sugar, and serviettes from restaurants?" asked Tracy after we'd eaten. I didn't have an answer. The next day, we went to the movies together. "Why does your mom sneak her own popcorn and drinks into the movies?" Tracy asked me as the movie started. Your mom is cheap, she said. I was angry with Tracy. I thought she was being mean. I didn't want to believe her, but as I cooled down, what she said opened up my eyes to what was actually happening. From then on, things started to make sense. I realized that people were actually laughing at us in my mom's rickshaw. That was when I told my mom that she didn't need to take us to school anymore. I'll walk Mark to school, Mom. It's good exercise for us. My mom quickly agreed. It gives me more time to turn our recycling into usable things in the house. Besides, we're going to save lots of money on gas. I got shivers when she said that. Now I had a very different feeling about Mom's creativity. A week later, Mom took out all the showers. She replaced them with a bucket outside in the garden. You know how much water we're going to save now? She said, smiling. Luckily, when my dad saw that the neighbors were spying on him showering, he put an end to this. My dad had a lot of patience for my mom. He loved her despite her crazy cheapness. My dad had a great job and we had money to spend, but my mom didn't want to hear any of that. We have enough money until the government freezes our accounts, said my mom. That's when you'll thank me for all that I do for you and your brother. The older we got, the less we saw our dad. His business trips went from being a few days long to a few weeks at a time. Soon it was months before we would see him. I should have known that something was up, but I'll admit that I was too wrapped up in my own problems. When I first got my period, I faced a problem I never expected. I knew at the time that I should start using pads and tampons, but instead, I was shocked to see my mom holding a period cup and saying, "Here you go, sweetie. You will be using this every time you get your period from now on." Not only that, but she also gave me a weird piece of fabric and said, "Spoiled teen girls start wearing a bra as they grow up, but a special girl like you will wear this." She handed me the piece of fabric. I didn't understand what it was supposed to be for. You see, you only need to wrap it around your chest and there you go, a comfy bra for free. I knew at that point that my mom had gone way too far. My brother Mark hated my mom's cheapness even more than I did. Because he was younger than me, Mark got all my hand-me-downs. From jeans to t-shirts and even jerseys, Mark grew up wearing my clothes. He was creative in how he reshaped them to look like something that a boy would wear. But by the time he was 13, his classmates wouldn't let him get away with this. They left lipstick and makeup on his desk. They stuck fashion articles to his locker. They even started calling him Marcy. "Leave my brother alone," I said to them. But they just laughed. "What are you gonna do? Will your mother chase us in her rickshaw?" I had no reply to this. I was furious, and so was Mark. He went home and told Mom that he needed clothes for boys. My mother almost lost it. "We don't have money for new clothes," she screamed. "If you want new clothes, I'll make them for you." Mom knitted Mark the most awful, trendy clothes we'd ever seen. Mark took one look at the new clothes Mom had made and said, "It's fine, I'll wear the hand-me-downs." Mark and I were tired of Mom's cheapness. That afternoon in my room, we had a secret meeting about what we could do to stop Mom from embarrassing us in the future. We needed help, so we called our dad. Dad didn't like to fight with Mom. He was a calm man who didn't like complications and fights. So whenever Mom went into one of her raging cheap spins, we made an arrangement with Dad. He sent us the money we needed, and in return, all he wanted us to do was keep these transactions from our mom. We agreed. Now we were able to buy all the clothes and items that we needed. The next part of our plan was pretty simple. My best friend Tracy lived down the road from us. We kept our secret stash of clothes at Tracy's house. Every morning, we left home in Mom's clothes. Then we stopped at Tracy's house, changed, and then went to school in our new clothes. We did this for years, and there was peace in the house, but nothing lasts forever, especially when you've got a mom that has a PhD in cheapology. Summer vacation arrived, and I was excited. I'd just started dating a boy that I really liked. His name was Devin. He didn't judge me like the other kids did. I was looking forward to spending time with him and getting away from my bizarre life. That idea didn't last long. A week into the vacation, Mom arrived home with shovels, pickaxes, and other digging equipment. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked. Mom smiled. "We're going to build a bunker. I've borrowed all this equipment from our neighbors so that we can get it done quickly." "We're going to build a bunker? As in, not just you?" "Correct. My hands make light work, and we'd better get this done before your grandpa comes to visit. He's always said that every house must have a bunker." I was surprised to hear about this visit. Grandpa hadn't left his home in 20 years. My grandfather was in the Second World War. It left him paranoid about the future. He turned his home into a doomsday bunker and taught his family to save everything they could. Nothing useful was ever thrown away, and it had to be used at least 3 or 4 times before it was thrown out. Grandpa was the reason Mom was the way she was. Mark and I didn't have a choice in the matter. We were going to build a bunker. I had to cancel plans with Devin. I made as many excuses as I could, but he wouldn't believe any of them. "I'm coming over to see you," he said. Before I could stop him, he hung up. A few minutes later, he arrived at my house. Up until then, I'd managed to keep him outside. I greeted him at the front door, covered in dirt. "What's going on?" he asked. I knew that no excuses were going to make any sense now, so I told him the truth. To my surprise, he didn't run away or even laugh. "Cool, I've never seen a bunker before. Can I check it out?" I let Devin in. I introduced him to my mom. He held out his hand to greet her. She put a shovel in his hand. "If you're going to be here, then you're going to work," she said. At that moment, I could have died, but Devin just smiled and said, "Thank you." We spent the rest of the day digging. How romantic, right? We dug for hours and hours, only resting to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Dad was away on yet another business trip and was basically unreachable. We worked like this for a week, with Devin coming over every day. We dug until our hands ached. When our neighbors started seeing what Mom was doing, they became suspicious. They called the police on us. A squad car came around and asked Mom what she was doing. She told them about the bunker. They nodded while she spoke, but we could tell that they wanted to laugh at her. The police left soon enough, asking Mom to make sure that the structure was safe. Mom told them that it would be, but knowing Mom, she'd never hire an architect to design this bunker. "It's a waste of money," she said. Anyway, my father taught me how to make a bunker when I was 9 years old. 9? I couldn't believe it. I felt sorry for Mom. She'd had a pretty tough life. Mark and I got back to work. It was becoming easier now, and it would have been fine if the news reporters hadn't arrived. Someone must have contacted the newspapers telling them about what was going on in our backyard. A day later, we had reporters outside the house. Cameras popped over our wall. Some of our classmates came to watch and laugh, too. We live in a town where not much news happens, so when someone starts building a bunker, it gets onto the front page of the newspaper. Mark and I were totally embarrassed the following week when we saw Mom smiling on the front page of the paper. The headline read, "Doomsday Lady Builds a Bunker." I was so grateful that we were on vacation. I was so grateful for Devin. He stayed through the whole ordeal and held me when it became too much. I knew then that he loved me. I also knew that I couldn't live this way much longer. A few weeks later, the bunker was finished. Mom called Grandpa to tell him that she was ready for his visit. He canceled on her, saying that it wasn't safe to leave the house. Mom was upset, but I was furious. I couldn't do this anymore. The day I turned 18, I left home. Mom wasn't happy and neither was Mark, but I wouldn't let them stop me. Devin and I found jobs and made enough to rent a small apartment. A few years later, we got married. A few years after that, we had 2 beautiful children. Being a mother was tough, but I promised myself I'd be nothing like my mom. I kept in touch with Mom, but only through calls and messages. I kept my distance from her. Mark came to visit often. Dad, well, he was so busy with work that we barely heard from him. When my kids were about 5, Mom called me with news. "Your grandpa is coming to visit," she said excitedly, "and I'd like you to come and see him." I didn't want to go, but Devin talked me into it. "Family is important," he said. So we went. The next day, we went to my mom's house. "He'll probably come on the bus," said Mom. "Back in the old days, he would have walked, but his hip is acting up now." Mark and I looked at each other. What kind of family had we grown up in? "Go to the bus to pick up your grandfather," said Mom. Mark and I walked down the road to the bus stop. The first bus arrived, but Grandpa wasn't on it. He wasn't on the second or the third bus. An hour later, we walked back home. As we arrived back at the house, a brand new car pulled up to the house. Mark and I couldn't believe it. It was Grandpa. He looked nothing like we remembered him. The Grandpa we remembered wore old clothes, cut his own hair, and had a beard longer than Santa's. This Grandpa stepped out of the car looking different. He was dressed in sick clothes and looked like $1,000,000. "Kiddos, so good to see you both. Come give Grandpa a hug." We hugged him and smelled his cologne. It was definitely something expensive. Then we helped him with his bags. If we were shocked by what we saw, Mom's reaction was even worse. She just about fell over when she saw Grandpa. He was different, calmer, friendlier, laid back, and full of jokes. Mom showed him around the house. She went through each room and explained how she had used everything that he had taught her when she was a girl. Grandpa smiled politely, but we could see that he was surprised and a little shocked by Mom's efforts. Finally, Mom showed Grandpa the bunker. We could tell how proud she was of her design. "And we put it together in just over a month," she said, "filled with everything we'll need for 10 years. Grandpa's face went white. "That's great news. Why don't we get some fresh air? And I could use a glass of water." Mom said she'd get it for him. While Mom was away, Grandpa pulled us aside. "What's happened to her?" he asked. "What do you mean?" I said. "She's always been like this? Always?" asked Grandpa. He paused a moment and then dropped his head. "It's my fault. I raised her believing that the end of the world was always just around the corner, although I was rich. But after my wife was gone, I realized I was a lonely man and that I missed out on a lot in my life. I decided to change. I'm sorry, kiddos, but don't worry. I'm going to talk some sense into her. Mark and I could have cried at that point. We were so relieved. We hugged Grandpa and thanked him. That evening after a tinned food dinner, Grandpa sat Mom down and had a heart-to-heart with her. I sent Devin home with the kids. Mark and I listened from another room. You've done a great job of preparing for the end of the world, Trisha, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Mom looked shocked. What do you mean? Grandpa stopped her. I know. When you were growing up, I thought that the world was in serious trouble. I filled your head with a lot of ideas that I now see are a bit extreme. After your mother was gone, I started to think about life differently. Trisha, it's important to save and be sensible with what we have, but it's also important to enjoy life. It was the toughest conversation that Mom had ever had. Everything that she had ever believed in had just been pulled out from under her. She was quiet for a long time. Dad, it's okay. I'm going to keep doing what you taught me. We need to be prepared for every disaster. Grandpa tried to reason with her, but she didn't want to hear it. Mark and I tried to. Enough of this, Mom, I said. This is the reason why I left. And it's the reason why Dad left too, said Mark. Mom shook her head. She looked completely confused. No, he's away on business. He's been away on business for 10 years now, Mom, said Mark. He told me that he's not coming back, and it's because of you, because of all of this. My mom burst into tears. So I just let go? Give up? My mom said quietly. You have this skill and it's so great, but you can't always be sacrificing the present for the future. The world is not going to end anytime soon. Grandpa chuckled. A long pause followed. Then her eyes became wet with tears. She began to speak, but only tears fell. It's okay, Mom. We're all here to help you. Mom took a deep breath before she spoke. Okay, how do you guys do it? Do we have to go out for dinner as regular people do? I can do that now for a start. I smiled widely. Things wouldn't change all at once, but, well, she was finally trying to bust out of her bubble, and that's all that mattered to us.